I always believed the quiet of early morning could wash a soul clean, even mine. But ever since that terrible week, even sunrise feels heavy on my chest, like the light itself is tired of trying to forgive me. Funny how one small moment, a neighbor knocking on your door, can end up haunting every breath you take afterward. I remember that night clearer than anything else in my whole 72 years. I was sitting in my old rocking chair by the kitchen window, listening to the wind roll between the houses. You live long enough, you start hearing things in the wind, memories, warnings, sometimes even voices of the folks you lost. I guess that's why I didn't jump when the knock came loud and sharp, like somebody's knuckles were trembling. It was my neighbor, sweet little Miss Janine Carter. 49, mother of 2 boys who hardly visited, divorced twice, always trying to smile like the world didn't bite her as hard as it did. She looked so small on my porch that night, wrapped up in her faded red sweater. The porch light flickered above her, making her face look worn out like she'd been crying. "Miss Eloise," she said, voice shaking just a touch. "I'm so sorry to bother you this late, but do you have any sugar? I'm trying to finish a peach cobbler. Family's coming tomorrow." Even now, thinking back, my stomach twists itself into knots. Because the moment she said sugar, something inside me lit up, some mix of pride and warmth. I always kept sugar. I always kept everything anybody might need. Folks around here used to call me the block's little pantry. "Of course, baby," I told her. "Come on in out of that cold." She stepped inside, her shoes squeaking on the linoleum. My house smelled of cinnamon and lemon oil. Been cleaning all afternoon because when you're older, the dust seems to show up twice as fast. Janine looked around like she always did, tucking everything in, complimenting the curtains I had sewn myself, saying how she wished she could keep her house as cozy as mine. If I'd known that'd be the last time she'd ever step over my threshold, maybe I'd have hugged her. Maybe I'd have held her hand longer. Maybe I'd have kept the sugar jar closed. Lord help me. I walked to the shelf over my stove, where 2 mason jars sat side by side. One filled with plain white sugar. The other held something I should have thrown away months ago. My late husband's medicine. The powdered kind he used when swallowing pills got too hard. Strong stuff. The kind the doctor warned me never to mix up. I'd labeled the jar once, big letters, not sugar. But with time the ink faded and I'd never rewrote it. Should have done so many things. And here's the thing that's been ripping at me since that night. I didn't check. My old hands just reached, fast and careless. I was chatting with Janine, telling her about how my daughter called earlier and how grandbaby's teeth finally came in. I wasn't looking. I wasn't thinking. I just unscrewed the lid and scooped out a cupful. When I handed it to her, she smiled that soft, grateful smile of hers. "You always save me, Miss Eloise," she said. "I don't know what I'd do without your kindness." If God ever sent a warning, it must have been in the way my heart stuttered right then. A moment of cold rushing up from my toes to my throat. But I brushed it off. Told myself it was just old age, or maybe that wind sneaking under the door. She left with a little wave, and I watched her cross the driveway back to her house, her silhouette small but bright under the moonlight. I remember thinking she looked lighter that night, like she had hope again. Maybe that's why the guilt hits so hard even now. Because she walked away believing I'd helped her. I sat back in my chair afterward, humming an old hymn, hands folded in my lap. I didn't know what I'd done. Not yet. Not until morning. When the banging came at 6 a.m., I thought maybe it was the mailman with a package. I opened the door to find 2 police officers standing on my porch. One tall and pale, the other young and dark-skinned, barely old enough to grow a proper beard. Their faces were tight. Serious. The kind of serious you only see when something real bad happened. "Ma'am," the older officer said, "we're sorry to wake you, but do you know a Ms. Janine Carter?" I swear my knees almost buckled. "Of course I do," I whispered. "What's wrong? Did something happen?" They looked at each other and I knew. My soul knew before their mouths opened. "I'm sorry, ma'am. She was found unresponsive in her home this morning." I can still hear those words echoing down the hallways of my mind. Still feel the way my heart lurched like it was trying to leap out of my chest. "No," I said, shaking my head, gripping the doorframe. "No, not Janine. She was just here last night. She was fine." The younger officer cleared his throat. "We're still investigating, ma'am. No signs of forced entry. No obvious trauma. We have to consider every possibility." But I didn't hear much after that because my mind raced straight to those 2 jars in my kitchen. Sugar. Medicine. I felt my stomach drop as the truth crawled its way into me like a slow, poisonous worm. Could I have? No. No. I refused to let the thought settle. But it did. And once it settled, it never left. The officers asked me a few questions, when I last saw her, whether she'd seemed upset or ill. I lied. Not about everything, but about the sugar. I told them she'd stopped by just to say hello, nothing more. The lie slid out too easily, like my mouth was trying to protect me from myself. When they finally left, I closed the door gently, quietly, like any loud sound might shatter what was left of me. I walked to the kitchen. My hands were trembling so bad I had to steady them on the counter. Then I looked up at those 2 jars. Same size. Same color glass. Same fading labels. And that's when the hook in my chest tightened, tugging my breath right out of me. The jar of real sugar was still full. The other one, my husband's medicine, was missing a scoop. My body went cold, colder than anything I'd ever felt. I grabbed the counter with both hands, bowing my head as tears spilled onto the linoleum. I knew. I didn't need no investigation. I didn't need no officers telling me possibilities. I didn't need no autopsy report. I knew what I'd done, or what I'd caused. And the worst part, the part that'd keep me awake for months to come? She trusted me. She trusted me with her smile, her cobbler, her heart, her life. And I gave her poison in a jar. Not on purpose. But in this world, sometimes not on purpose don't matter as much as we hope it does. I spent the rest of that morning wandering my house like a ghost, carrying guilt that felt heavier than any grief I'd ever known. You'd think after losing a husband, after burying friends, after living through things most folks couldn't imagine, you'd think a heart would toughen up. But guilt don't care about age. It don't care about intention. It curls around your ribs and squeezes, slow and steady, like it's trying to break you piece by piece. By afternoon, the whole neighborhood knew. Sirens, whispers, cars lined up outside her house. Folks holding each other on the sidewalk. People shaking their heads, wondering what happened to sweet Janine. Everyone kept saying the same thing. She was just baking last night. And every time I heard that, something inside me cracked a little more. I stayed indoors, curtains drawn, hands shaking so bad I could barely hold a cup of tea. I kept replaying every second. Her voice on my porch, the jar in my hand, her smile when she left. And then the moment I realized the truth. It kept replaying like a broken record. I didn't sleep that night. Couldn't. For the first time in my life, I felt afraid of myself. The next morning, I woke up with my heart already pounding like it had been running all night without me. I shuffled to the kitchen, rubbing my eyes, hoping maybe I'd dreamed it all. But there those jars sat, side by side on the shelf, mocking me in the morning light. Same as before. Same as always. Except now, one of them might as well have been a gravestone. I stood there staring so long my coffee turned cold before I even remembered I'd poured it. I kept whispering to myself, "It was a mistake, Eloise. A mistake ain't murder." But even saying the word murder, out loud made my chest seize up. I didn't deserve to say such a thing about myself, and yet it crept right in anyway, like a snake slithering into a warm house. Around 10 o'clock, I heard voices outside. Folks gathering again. The neighborhood was buzzing, full of worry, full of questions. I saw Mrs. Lambert from across the street, shaking her head like she already knew somebody to blame. And for a moment, I wondered if she could see it on me, if guilt showed on a person's skin like ink. I pulled the curtain back just a little, enough to peek outside. They'd brought in more investigators. A white van with the county logo parked crooked in Janine's driveway. I could see her front door propped open. They were carrying out bags, boxes, clipboards. I saw one man hold up a baking dish, the kind you'd use for a cobbler. My throat closed up. I let the curtain fall and backed away, hands shaking. That dish felt like it was screaming at me, even from across the yard. I tried to busy myself. Tried to dust the living room, wipe down the table, polish the silverware. But every few minutes my mind drifted back to that jar. That scooped out space like a missing tooth. I walked back into the kitchen, staring at it again. I pulled the jar down carefully, like it might explode in my palms. I twisted the lid open. Smelled the powder inside. Not sugar. Not sweet. No mistaking it now. My knees almost gave out. I set the jar down hard enough to make the counter shake. And then a new thought hit me, one so sharp it stole my breath. What if they came over and asked about it? What if they searched homes? What if they questioned every neighbor, asked for any unusual items, any medicines, any powders? What if they found this? I grabbed the jar with both hands, ready to throw it in the trash. But then I froze. What if throwing it away looked worse? What if someone saw it in the bin? What if dogs or birds got to it? What if, Lord help me, someone else got hurt? I was trapped. Couldn't throw it away. Couldn't keep it. Couldn't explain it. There ain't no rulebook for how to handle bein' the reason someone died. There ain't no pamphlet for when guilt sits between your ribs, making itself at home. Part of me wanted to walk right over to the police and confess. Just fall to my knees and say, I didn't mean to. I swear I didn't mean to. But the other part, the scared, shaking, lonely part, knew what would happen if I did. A woman my age going to prison? I wouldn't last a month. My body's too tired, too brittle. And I knew my daughter would fall apart if she heard I'd done something so awful. My grandbaby would grow up wondering why Grandma Eloise vanished one day. I pressed my hand to my forehead, whispering, Lord, give me wisdom. Please. But no wisdom came. Just that thick, awful silence that follows a prayer God ain't ready to answer yet. So instead of confessing, I set the jar back on the shelf. Turned it so the faded label was facing the wall. Then I wiped the counter again, even though it didn't need wiping. My hands needed something to do, or they were going to turn on me. Around lunchtime I heard footsteps on my porch. I froze. The kind of freeze where your breath stops and your soul tries to hide behind your ribs. 3 slow knocks. Not the police knock, I recognized that harsh, official rhythm from earlier. This one was softer. Familiar. I opened the door to find Tammy Peters, the neighborhood organizer, standing there with a casserole dish and a trembling smile. Eloise, she said, we're tucking meals to Janine's boys. They'll be in town for a few days making arrangements. Thought I'd ask if you wanted to contribute something. You were always so close with her. Close. The word landed heavy. I forced a smile. Oh, Tammy, that's real kind of you. I'll bring something by later. She touched my arm gently. You okay? You look pale. I swallowed hard. Just tired, baby. Just a lot going on. She nodded, but I could see she wasn't fully convinced. Well, we love you. If you need anything, don't you hesitate. I watched her walk away, and a part of me screamed inside. You can't even make a casserole right now without wondering if you're poisoning somebody else. The idea of baking anything made my stomach churn. I couldn't trust myself. Couldn't trust my hands. Couldn't trust my own home. When I closed the door, I heard something I didn't expect. My own voice, breaking into a sob so deep it bent me forward. I held onto the wall, crying like I hadn't cried since my husband's funeral. Not gentle tears. Not the quiet kind. These were raw, ugly, hurting sobs, the kind that shake the whole house with their weight. Because in that moment, I realized something terrifying. Guilt wasn't just sitting with me. It had moved in, settled its suitcase right next to my heartbeat. And then, just when I thought I was done breaking for the day, the phone rang. I flinched so hard I nearly knocked over the lamp. I picked up the receiver with trembling hands. Hello. A quiet voice answered, thick with grief. Miss Eloise, this is Michael. Janine's oldest. My knees locked. That boy, well, he wasn't a boy anymore, almost 30, but I still remembered him running around barefoot in their yard when he was little. The sound of his voice felt like a ghost walking through my heart. I heard Mama came by to see you last night, he said softly. Every part of me curled inward. She did, I whispered. Just for a moment. She was herself. There was a pause, a heavy one. I could hear him breathing like he'd been crying for hours. We found her cobbler in the oven, he said. Looked like she never got to finish it. It just sat there all night. My breath caught. I wanted to scream, to confess, to beg, but the words wouldn't come. My tongue felt glued to the back of my throat. She always talked about you, he continued. Said you were the kindest soul on this street. I thought you should know. Kindest. If only he knew the truth. I pressed my hand to my chest, forcing myself to speak through the tightness. Michael, your mama was a good woman. A real good woman. I wanted to say more. Wanted to tell him everything. But he sniffled, thanked me, and said goodbye before hanging up. Left me standing there with the phone still in my hand, frozen, sweating, shaking. When I finally set the receiver down, a thought flashed through my mind, sharp as broken glass. If they do an autopsy, they'll find it. They'll know. They'll come back to my door. And no matter how accidental it was, they won't see an old woman who made a mistake. They'll see the one who handed a dead woman her last ingredient. I leaned against the wall, breathing slow and shallow. If there was ever a moment I could have chosen to come clean, it was right then. But fear wrapped itself around my throat, whispering that confession wouldn't bring Janine back. It'd only take the rest of my life away too. And somewhere deep inside, somewhere I ain't proud of, I listened. But guilt has a way of whispering too. And its whisper lasts a whole lot longer. The next few days slid by like thick molasses, slow and sticky, clinging to everything. I tried to move through my house like normal, but every step felt wrong, like I was walking on someone else's floorboards. Even the air felt heavier, like it had been holding its breath since the moment they took Janine away. On the third day, I sat in my armchair with the television on, though I wasn't watching a thing. The news anchor's voice was just background noise, a substitute for the silence that had been following me from room to room. I kept replaying Janine's smile, the way she'd held that jar, the trust in her eyes. It hurt worse every time. When the doorbell rang, I jumped so hard I dropped the TV remote. It clattered to the floor, batteries rolling under the coffee table. I swallowed, straightened myself, and went to the door. My fingers hovered over the doorknob for a second that felt like an hour. I opened it slow. Officer Daniels stood there, the younger one, the one with barely their facial hair. His face looked soft, not stern like before, but still serious enough to make my heart stutter. "Ma'am," he greeted, taking off his cap. "Sorry to bother you again." The word again felt like a knife. "It's all right," I said, though my voice sounded thinner than usual. He shifted his weight back and forth, like he wasn't sure how to stand. That made me even more nervous. Officers don't fidget unless they're walking on fragile ground. "We're just following up with neighbors," he said finally. "Trying to get a clearer timeline." "Of course," I heard myself say. "We know Ms. Carter stopped by here the night before she passed. You mentioned she wasn't here long." My throat tightened. "Yes," I said. "Just a few minutes." "What did y'all talk about?" My palms grew sweaty. "Oh, just family. She said her boys were coming in." She seemed real excited. He nodded, jotting quick notes. "She didn't mention feeling sick? Dizzy? Anything unusual?" The question made my stomach twist. "No," I whispered. "She seemed fine." He studied me then. Not rudely. Not accusing. Just looking. Like he was trying to read my soul through my eyes. "Ma'am," he said softly, "if anything comes to mind, anything, you let us know. Sometimes little details make a big difference." I nodded, though I felt the lie settle into my bones like a cold wind. "I will." He put his cap back on and gave me a gentle smile, the kind folks give when they don't want to scare you. "You take care of yourself, all right?" When he walked down the steps, I closed the door quietly. Didn't move for a long while. Felt like if I moved too fast, the truth might spill out of my mouth and run after him. I went straight to the kitchen, stared at the shelf, stared at that jar. That awful jar that had started to feel like a living thing watching me. A part of me wanted to smash it on the floor, watch the powder scatter like ashes. But another part of me imagined investigators dusting the shards, finding this or that, putting pieces together. No matter what I thought of doing, fear twisted itself tighter around me. Instead, I put the jar inside an old cookie tin, latched it shut, and shoved it all the way to the back of the cabinet. Out of sight, but not out of mind. Never out of mind. I sat at the kitchen table, elbows on the wood, fingers pressed into my temples. And right then a thought hit me, the kind that knocks the breath out of you. What if God was punishing me? What if he'd been sending signs for months, and I'd ignored every single one? My husband's medicine sitting there, labels fading. My hands shakier than they used to be. My memory slipping in little soft patches. Maybe this was the moment where all the small warnings added up to one terrible mistake. I felt tears burning, but I blinked them back. Couldn't cry anymore. Felt like I'd run out of tears days ago. I stood up and started pacing, muttering to myself. My grandmother used to say talking out loud helps untangle the knots in your mind. But sometimes speaking the truth out loud just makes it hurt worse. "Mistake," I whispered. "Just a mistake." But even saying it didn't feel like relief. It felt like pleading. Hours passed. Or minutes. Hard to tell when your mind is running on fear and guilt. Around dinner time, I heard a knock again. A softer one this time, hesitant. I considered pretending I wasn't home, but I didn't want anyone thinking I needed a wellness check. That'd bring more police to my door, more eyes, more questions. I opened it just enough to peek. It was Mrs. Lambert from across the street, clutching a foil-wrapped dish, and wearing that church lady concern that always feels like judgment with powdered sugar on top. "Eloise," she said, leaning in like she wanted to smell the truth on me. "I made too much chicken casserole. Thought you might want some." Her eyes darted over my face, searching for cracks. She stepped closer. "Honey, I know you and Janine were close. This must be so hard on you." Her sympathy curled wrong inside me. Felt like a hot wire pressing into my ribs. Because if she knew the truth, if any of them did, this whole neighborhood would turn on me faster than a summer storm. "That's very sweet, baby." I murmured, taking the dish with shaking hands. Thank you. Have the police asked you anything else? She asked casually, but her eyes sharpened like little pins. I stiffened. No, I said quickly. Just the one visit. She nodded slowly, as if she didn't quite believe me. Well, she said, smoothing her sweater. If you hear anything, you let me know. The whole street's on edge. Edge. The word echoed through me. The whole street was on edge. And I was the one holding the sharpest piece. She left after lingering too long, her eyes sweeping across my porch, my hands, my face. I shut the door behind her and locked it, then set the casserole on the counter like it weighed 50 pounds. I sat down again, burying my face in my hands. The guilt wasn't just creeping anymore. It was taking up residence, rearranging my insides, putting its feet up like it planned to stay. And then came the worst moment of the night, something so small yet so crushing. While washing a dish, I heard a faint sound from outside. Children laughing, running, playing in the street. The same sound I'd heard for decades. But this time, instead of smiling at their joy, I froze. Because the laugh that carried across the yard sounded just a little like Janine's voice. My heart stopped. I walked to the back door, opened it slowly, peering into the twilight. The yard was empty. Quiet. But that sound lingered somewhere in the corners of my mind. That's when the truth hit me like a blow. I wasn't just afraid of the police. I wasn't just afraid of the neighbors. I was afraid of myself. Afraid of what I might forget next. Afraid of what my hands might do without meaning to. Afraid that this wasn't just a one-time tragedy, but the first sign of my mind slipping through my fingers like sand. I closed the door and leaned my forehead against it, whispering into the dark. Lord, if this is what getting old means, please don't let me hurt anybody else. But the night didn't answer. It just swallowed my words whole. The next morning came with a gray sky that looked just as tired as I felt. I got out of bed slow, every joint complaining, every breath tight. For a moment, I stood by the window, watching the street through a thin fog rolling over the lawns. It made everything look softer, blurred, almost peaceful. But peaceful don't mean innocent. Fog can hide all kinds of things. I shuffled to the kitchen, but the moment I walked in, my eyes went to that cabinet. Even though the cookie tin was hidden behind stacks of plates and bowls, I still felt it staring at me. Felt its presence like a pulse under the floorboards. That jar wasn't going anywhere. Not until someone found it, or until I decided what to do. And I still didn't know. I made myself some oatmeal, though I barely ate 2 bites. Couldn't taste a thing. My stomach twisted the moment the spoon touched my tongue. I set the bowl in the sink and took a deep breath, willing myself to pull it together. But the truth was simple. I wasn't together. I hadn't been since the moment Janine walked out my door with that jar in her hands. Around noon, I heard someone outside again. I peeked through the blinds and saw Janine's boys arriving with boxes. 2 big men lifting furniture onto a truck. I watched them carry her things like they were holding bits of her life in their arms. Clothing, chairs, books, memories all packed away. Watching them made my stomach sink even deeper. Because while they carried her life piece by piece, I carried the weight of her death all at once. I closed the blinds and stepped back. I couldn't watch anymore. I tried cleaning again. Seems like that's all I'd been doing lately. But each time I picked up a rag, I just stood there staring off, stuck in some memory. Sometimes it was the good ones. Janine coming over with warm cornbread. Us sitting on the porch in summer, gossiping about the neighbor's yard being too messy. Her laugh, Lord, that laugh. Soft and warm like a quilt. Other times, the memories weren't memories at all. They were what-ifs. What if she had gone to someone else's house that night? What if I'd checked the jar? What if I'd noticed the label faded? What if the light had been brighter in the kitchen? What if my hands hadn't been shaking? What if? Every one of those thoughts felt like a little blade carving at me. Late afternoon, I heard another knock at the door. I nearly whispered, "Please no," under my breath. But I steadied myself and opened it. This time it was Pastor Dawkins from the church down the road. A tall man with warm eyes and a voice that always sounded like Sunday morning. He held a Bible in one hand, a casserole in the other. "Miss Eloise," he said with a small smile. "The community's thinking about you. I thought I'd stop by, see how your heart's holding up." My heart. If only he knew. "I'm managing," I said softly. He stepped inside when I offered, settling into the living room. I sat on the couch opposite him, my hands folded tight in my lap. "Death hits a neighborhood like a cold wind," he said gently. "People huddle up. They come together." He paused. "I know you and Janine were close." His words made my chest ache. I swallowed hard. She was a dear soul, I whispered. Didn't deserve to leave this world the way she did. He nodded slowly. No one knows yet exactly what happened. Police are still trying to piece things together. He set the casserole down on the table, looking at me with those warm, searching eyes. But I know you've been carrying something heavy these past few days. I can feel it. I froze. It felt like the whole room went still, like the air thickened. Sometimes, he continued, a guilty conscience ain't about wrongdoing. Sometimes it's just grief sitting in a person's chest, trying to find words. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. Not confession. Not lies. Just silence. He leaned forward slightly. And sometimes, he said softly, the devil uses guilt to twist the good-hearted into punishing themselves. Good-hearted. If only he knew the truth sitting in my cabinet. I managed a weak smile. Thank you for stopping by, Pastor. He patted my hand. If you need to talk, you call me. Don't bear sorrow alone. It grows ugly when it's kept in the dark. Those words stuck to me long after he left. Don't bear sorrow alone. But the thing inside me wasn't sorrow anymore. It was something darker. Something I didn't know how to name. When the house finally went quiet again, I sat in that same spot and replayed everything the pastor said. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized the truth. This wasn't the devil twisting guilt. This was me. My mistake. My hands. My jar. My fault. And the weight of that sat on my chest like a stone. As the sun went down and streetlights flickered on, I walked slowly to the kitchen. Every step felt heavy, deliberate. I opened the cabinet and pulled out the cookie tin. My fingers trembled as I lifted the lid. The jar sat inside, its faded label almost mocking me. I lifted it out, unscrewed the lid, and stared at the powder inside. Such a small thing. Such an innocent color. But powerful enough to end a life. I felt my breath tremble. For a moment I considered pouring it down the sink. Washing it away. Letting the water take this guilt somewhere far from me. But I stopped myself. Because what if someone tested the pipes later? What if it clung to the drain? What if a trace was found somewhere in my home? Fear clamped down again, choking any chance at resolution. I screwed the lid back on and held the jar against my chest for a moment, closing my eyes. It felt cold. Unforgiving. The truth settled in deep as a winter chill. I couldn't destroy it. I couldn't confess it. I couldn't carry it. But I was. And I would. I put the jar back in the tin, back in the cabinet, like hiding a secret inside another secret. And as I closed the cabinet door, I felt something shift inside me. Not relief. Not clarity. Just acceptance. A dark, quiet acceptance that this guilt was now part of me. That I would wake with it, sleep with it, breathe with it. That every time I walked in this kitchen, its presence would linger in the air like invisible smoke. As the night deepened, I sat at the table, staring at nothing. And that's when the next knock came. Slow. Hesitant. Not police. Not a neighbor. Something worse. The kind of knock that feels like a question you don't want the answer to. I stood up fast, my heart thudding, and for a split second, I considered not answering. But curiosity, fear's older sibling, pushed me to the door. I opened it just a crack. And standing there, eyes red, face tired, was Michael, Janine's oldest son. His voice was soft, but there was something heavy sitting under it. Miss Eloise, he said. I need to talk to you. About my mama. My blood ran cold. It felt like the whole night pulled tight around me, like someone was drawing, the curtains of the world closed. For a moment, I just stared at him. The same boy who used to run circles around his mama's rose bushes, the same boy who'd grown into a man while I wasn't looking. Now he stood on my porch, grown and grieving, and looking at me like I was the last page in a book he didn't want to finish. Come on in, baby, I heard myself say, though my voice didn't sound like mine. It sounded thinner, older, pulled at the edges. He stepped inside slow, like my house suddenly had something sacred in it. Or something dangerous. I led him to the kitchen. I don't know why. Maybe 'cause it was the heart of the house. Maybe 'cause the truth, my truth, was sitting right behind that cabinet door, sealed in a tin like a sleeping ghost. He sat at the table, elbows on his knees, hands clasped tight like they were the only thing keeping him steady. His eyes were swollen, like he hadn't stopped crying for a second since yesterday. When he finally looked up at me, there was something raw in his expression, something that made the guilt in my own chest twist like a knife. Miss Eloise, he started, then stopped. He had to breathe through it. They still don't know what happened. The doctors, I mean. They can't explain why she went so fast. My throat closed. I swallowed, but it didn't help. Every word he spoke felt like a hand pressing on my heart, steady and deliberate. He rubbed his forehead. 1 minute she was fine. The next, his voice cracked. He didn't finish. I wanted to tell him I was sorry, but the words stuck in my mouth like sand. I know this is hard, I whispered. He nodded slowly. Then his gaze drifted to the counter. Not the cabinet, thank the Lord, but close enough that I felt a chill creep up my spine. She came over here, he said quietly. That night. I saw the text she sent me. She said she was just stopping by for sugar. You were the last one to see her. I felt the air leave my lungs. Not all at once. Bit by bit. Like something inside me was deaf Latin. He wasn't accusing me. His voice didn't have an ounce of suspicion in it. If anything, he sounded like he was confiding. Like he was trying to hold on to the last moments of his mama's life. And I was the nearest memory. But that didn't matter. Because guilt don't need accusation to bloom. It just needs opportunity. I whispered. She came over real quick. Barely stayed a minute. He nodded again, rubbing his hands together. Yeah, that's what we heard. And the police, they just a skin, everybody the same questions, you know. But, he hesitated. But, I asked, even though I didn't want the answer. He looked up at me, eyes soft and wounded. Mama always trusted you. Always said you were the one person on this block she could count on. I needed to ask you myself. A sharp breath caught in my chest. Ask me what? If she seemed all right when she left here. His voice trembled. If she said anything. If you noticed something I should know. There it was. The door I couldn't walk through. The truth I couldn't speak. The lie I didn't want to tell. I forced myself to breathe slow. Don't rush. Don't stumble. Lies, even small ones, got a way of showing their seams when spoken too fast. She seemed just fine, I said softly. She smiled. Said she just needed a little sugar. That was all. He let out a long, shaky breath like he'd been holding it since she passed. Okay, he whispered, almost to himself. Okay. Relief washed over his face, gentle and devastating. He believed me. And somehow that hurt worse. I pulled out a chair and sat across from him, my hands folded in my lap, so he wouldn't see them trembling. Guilt moves through the body in strange ways. Mine settled heavy in my bones, like an old storm coming back for a rerun. I miss her already, he murmured. You know how she was. Strong. Stubborn. Funny as hell. Always in everybody's business, but always for good reasons. A soft smile touched his lips. I felt my eyes burn. She loved you too, Miss Eloise. More than you knew. That nearly broke me right then. My chest tightened so fast I had to look away. The tin behind the cabinet door seemed to hum in the silence, like it knew it had power over me. Over him. Over both our lives. A quiet moment passed, heavy enough to bow the table legs. Then he lifted his head again. There's something else, he said. My pulse jumped. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. Not police forms. Not a doctor's report. A letter. I found this in her room, he said. She wrote it a few days before she died. Didn't send it. Didn't finish it. But it's for you. For me. My blood froze. My breath caught. For me. I whispered. He nodded and held it out. My fingers twitched. I didn't want to touch it. I didn't want to read it. I didn't want anything that belonged to the woman I killed sitting in my hands. But he kept holding it out, gentle and hopeful. And I couldn't refuse him without breaking something fragile between us. So I took it. The paper was soft at the edges, like she'd held it many times. It carried that faint lavender smell she always wore, mixed with something older, sadder. I unfolded it slow. My eyes scanned the first line. Eloise, I've been meaning to tell you something important. My breath hitched. The next words hit harder. I don't think I've been feeling right lately. A chill crawled up my spine. And I don't want to worry Michael. But I feel safe telling you. My hands shook. I had to grip the table. She'd been sick. Before the sugar. Before the poison. Before I walked her to the door and sealed her fate. She'd been sick and hiding it. The room tilted. The guilt inside me didn't vanish, not even close, but it twisted into something new, something sharper. He watched my face carefully. You okay, Miss Eloise? I folded the letter slow, keeping my voice steady even though my insides felt like broken glass. Yes, baby. I just didn't expect this. She trusted you, he repeated softly. Yeah, she did. And I betrayed that trust in the worst way imaginable. He reached across the table and touched my hand. If you think of anything at all, you tell me, all right? I nodded. But inside, I whispered the truth I could never say aloud. I already know everything. He stood, thanked me, hugged me gently like I was family. And as he walked out into the night, the door closing behind him, I felt the weight of that folded letter pressing against my palm, like a heartbeat that wasn't mine. My secret was growing heavier, and it wasn't done with me yet. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't even try. I sat at the kitchen table with that folded letter in front of me like it was some kind of living thing. Like it could breathe. Like it could judge me. The house was quiet, but not the peaceful kind of quiet. This was the kind that presses on your ribs, squeezes your lungs, whispers in the corners. Every creak sounded like her voice. Every shadow looked like her silhouette. Every breath felt borrowed. I kept hearing Michael's voice in my head. She trusted you. Over and over. Like the words were being carved into the insides of my ears. When the sun finally started sneaking through the blinds, I felt like I'd aged another 10 years overnight. My back hurt. My hands ached. My eyes were raw. But none of that compared to what was boiling in my mind. I'd wanted so badly for the letter to change something. To lighten the weight. To give me a sliver of hope. But instead it made it worse. Because now I knew she'd been sick, and she'd come to me anyway. She trusted me to look after her, and without even knowing, I'd done the opposite. That morning, I opened the cabinet again. The tin sat quiet, still, innocent, like it wasn't the anchor tied to my soul. I stared at it a long time. Long enough that the sunlight hit it, making the metal shine like it was mocking me. I reached out and touched it. Cold. Unmoving. Unapologetic. I wanted to throw it out. Wanted to dump it, burn it, bury it. I wanted it gone so bad my fingers twitched. But I didn't. Because throwing it out felt like pretending it never happened. And I wasn't allowed that kind of mercy. Not anymore. So I closed the cabinet. Again. A prison door locking me in. Later that afternoon, the street got busy. Folks walking to work, kids yelling, cars passing. Life moving on like it always does. The world don't stop just 'cause your heart's breaking. It barely pauses. Around lunchtime, I saw movement outside my window. Neighbors bringing food to Michael's house. Casseroles, pies, little store-bought cakes. They always bring food when somebody dies. Food is easier than comfort. Easier than truth. I watched them for a while, feeling detached, floating somewhere above myself. Then, out the corner of my eye, I saw someone walking toward my door. Detective Harris. Slow steps. Hands in his pockets. Eyes sharp even from a distance. My pulse jumped so hard it hurt. He knocked. Not gentle. Not polite. Just one of those firm knocks that sink right into your bones. I opened the door trying to look calm, but my hands were shaking on the inside. He nodded once, tucking off his hat like he was respectful, but his eyes were working overtime, scanning every inch of my face. "Afternoon, Miss Eloise," he said. My throat felt tight. "Afternoon. May I come in for just a moment?" That question wasn't really a question. I stepped aside. He walked in slow, looking around like he was talking pictures in his mind. Not suspicious. Just observant. Too observant. I led him to the kitchen. That was a mistake. As soon as we stepped inside, I felt exposed. Like the cabinet was whispering behind me. He sat. I stayed standing. "Miss Eloise," he said. "I just came by to ask a few more questions. Routine. You understand." "Lord help me," I nodded. He tapped his pen lightly on the table. "The medical team is still trying to determine what caused Ms. Janine's sudden decline. These things can be complicated." I swallowed hard. "Yes, I know. We're looking at everything. Every detail." His eyes flicked up to mine. "Everything matters right now." That sentence made my knees feel weak. He leaned forward. "You said she was here for sugar, correct?" I nodded. "Too fast." I slowed it down. "Yes. Just sugar. She didn't eat or drink anything while she was here?" "Nothing," I said quickly. He watched me closely. My face felt like it was betraying me. I tried to keep my breathing steady, but fear has a way of making your body forget how to act natural. After a moment, he nodded again. "All right." He jotted something down in his little notebook. "Her son mentioned you and Ms. Janine were close." "As close as neighbors can be," I whispered. He glanced around the kitchen one more time. Not long. Not suspicious. Just enough to make me want to hide behind my own shadow. Then he stood. "That's all for now, Miss Eloise. If anything at all comes back to you, any detail, no matter how small," he paused. "Call me." I nodded again. "I will." He slid his hat back on, gave me a polite smile, and walked to the door. Each step sounded louder than the last. When he stepped outside, he turned back to me. "She was a good woman," he said softly. "Yes," I whispered. "She was." He gave me a look, one of those deep, knowing looks people give you when they think they understand your grief. Then he headed down the walkway and disappeared into the slow afternoon. The door clicked shut, and I collapsed into a chair like my legs gave out from under me. I'd survived it. Barely. By a thread thinner than a whisper. But I knew he'd be back. Guilt always calls the world to your doorstep eventually. Later that evening, I went through the motions of making dinner, but my hands weren't steady. I dropped a spoon, a glass, a whole bowl of greens. My mind was stuck replaying every word the detective said, every glance, every pause. As the sky turned orange, I looked toward Michael's house. The porch light was on. People were still inside. Mornin'. Taking care of him. Holding him up. But nobody could hold me up now. I was sinking alone. The next morning, I tried to go outside to sweep the porch. A simple chore I'd been doing for 50 years. But as soon as I stepped out, Mrs. Turner from up the street waved at me, sweet and innocent. And I felt the guilt slam into my chest. I turned right back around and went inside. I couldn't look folks in the eye. Not anymore. Days passed. Then a week. Then another. The neighborhood healed. Michael returned to work. The detective stopped visiting. Life kept moving. Just like it always does. But inside me nothing healed. Every time I opened that cabinet, I felt my heart beat wrong. Every time I saw Michael carry in groceries, I felt my stomach pitch. Every time someone mentioned Janine's name, I felt my lungs tighten. It was like living with a ghost I created. A ghost who wasn't angry. Just disappointed. And that was worse. Sometimes at night, I'd open the letter she wrote me and read those same lines again and again. I don't think I've been feeling right lately, but I feel safe telling you. Safe. She felt safe with me. And I killed her. Not on purpose. But that didn't change a damn thing. One night, close to midnight, rain hitting the roof gentle-like, I sat alone at the table again. The house hummed with old memories. The street outside was quiet except for a few distant cars. I whispered into the empty room. Janine, I'm sorry. My voice cracked on the last word. Sorry didn't fix anything. Sorry didn't bring her back. Sorry didn't erase the truth. But it was all I had. I pressed a hand to my chest, feeling that ache that never left. People think guilt fades with time. It doesn't. Not real guilt. It changes shape. It settles deeper. It anchors itself inside you like a root. I live with that root now. Every day. Every hour. Every breath. And maybe one day, when I'm old enough or tired enough or ready enough, I'll tell someone the truth. But right now, I keep the jar in the cabinet. I keep the letter in the drawer. I keep the secret in my heart. And the guilt keeps me.